Hello out there. This is Pamela Fagan Hutchins, or at least it was last time I checked before I left my brain somewhere else this morning. I don't know what my problem is. I need more vitamin C, more coffee. This is Wine, Women, and Writing, and this is the videocast/podcast where I talk with other authors about their books. Most specifically and most frequently, other female authors about their books with authentic, complex female characters, because that's what and do it with a little irreverence and humor and oversharing if we're lucky. So I have a story to tell you first. The longtime listeners and viewers of this show know that my husband's a mess and that he travels a lot and that he loses everything. So yesterday he left on a trip from Mexico City, rolling straight into Korea, going to be gone a couple of weeks. In the past, what he's forgotten, it ranges from black leather jackets to cords to phones to passports to whatever it is that can throw my life most in a kerfluffle, driving hours to pick him up and take him to the airport where he has a layover. But this time he has a record-setting loss in a new category, and that's black dress shoes. He lost his fifth pair on his way to Mexico City, which matches his old record of black leather jackets. One pair of each, black leather jacket and shoes, now out in the ether floating somewhere. 5. Way to go, honey. Sending you my love. So back to the show and what we're doing today. So you guys also know that I'm partial to female characters and that I write them myself. You can see more about the shows. You can see more about my mysteries and all things writing at PamelaFaganHutchins.com, where you can catch old episodes. You can subscribe to get this free to your podcast RSS player of your choice. And you can also, if you want to support women in writing, you can go out through my website to a link that allows you to make really small support contributions and help these shows continue and help female writers get seen, get heard. And if you do that, you're going to get your name called out on the show. So today, make sure I get the names right. I am thanking Ralph and Gloria. So on behalf of listeners, viewers, readers, authors, guests, and me, thank you very, very much. Now, today, this lipstick mark on the cup here, this might be Earl Grey, it might not be, I'll never tell, but it would be appropriate if it were, because my guest today is Sara Rosett, and she's here to talk about her new England-based high society lady detective mystery, Murder in Black Tie. Welcome, Sara.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You are so very welcome. I'm glad to have you on the show. I need to tell you a quick story, and that is that when I started doing these podcasts a year and a half ago, videocast podcasts, I asked my street team, my super fan readers, the ones that move mountains for me, who do you want me to have on the show? Who do you guys read? And I have these two sisters that are so awesome, Tara and Karen, hello. And they both said, oh my gosh, Sara Rosett, you've got to read her books. You've got to find her. And then I went on a mission to go find you. So I don't know if you remember me cold calling you, nearly a year ago now, but that was because of my readers.
Oh, well, that is so cool. That is great. That's wonderful to hear.
It's super cool. You have a loyal following, my dear. And where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Houston, so not that far.
Not that far at all. Our Nowheresville little ranch is in Brenham. So I spent a lot of time very near you. And
yeah, very cool.
The every time I talk to you, though, it seems like you're going somewhere. Travel seems to be a constant for you. Tell me about your travels. Is this business or pleasure?
Oh, a little of both. I love to travel, and a lot of it was inspired by my reading. When I was younger, I read, I don't know if you're familiar with Mary Stewart books.
Yes.
I loved her stuff. And so I think because I read those when I was younger, it made me want to travel and visit all these interesting places, So now whenever we can, we go somewhere. My husband's job takes him places. And so for a while I would go with him, or I would go see him and visit him, because sometimes he would be somewhere for an extended amount of time. He was in the military.
Yeah.
And now that he's not in the military, we can kind of choose more where we want to go, so that's a lot of fun.
So more elegant locations than often.
Yes, military bases are not real luxurious.
But inspiring. Is there
Yeah.
a military mystery series in your future, or you've left that world behind you?
Well, actually, that was how I got started in mystery. So
Really?
my very first series was the Ellie Avery series about a military spouse who moved around the country and found murder and mayhem wherever she went. So,
So, I have read from the On the Run series, and I've read the On Location, is that what it's
yeah,
called?
yeah,
Series, and I've read two out of your High Society
right.
Lady
Yeah.
Detectives. So, you know, I did not know that you've already done it. That's pretty awesome. The
Yeah.
travel element seems to keep raising its head in your
hmm
mysteries as well. You have the On Location series,
hmm
where it's pretty direct there. Tell us a little bit about those.
Okay, well, those started because I was able to go on a trip and I visited Chatsworth House in
Uh-huh.
England, and it was just beautiful and gorgeous. And the little village around it was so cute. And I thought, this is a perfect setting for a cozy mystery. And so I took that and sort of fictionalized it. So uh, Chatsworth became part of U-Haul, and the little village became Nether Woodsmore. And so I've just indulged all my, you know, Anglophile geekiness into creating that, so that's been a lot of fun to create.
That it is fun, and it's a cozy, yet
Mhm.
it is less cozy than some cozies. When I read those books, it is a little bit more contemporary and straight up. It kind of straddles the fence.
Mhm.
Does that kind of describe where you go with some of your books too? You have straight up cozy. You have some that are historical, like we're going to
Right.
talk about today, and a little bit cozy. But you seem to experiment with the genre a little bit.
Yes, and I like having other things going on besides just the mystery. So, like with the Murder on Location, I wanted to bring in Jane Austen because I knew that like people love Jane Austen, and I thought, if I'm going to write about England, I might as well use that kind of as a theme. So I try and incorporate some other themes, and cozies are big for having themes. Like sometimes it's cooking, and I did not want to make recipes for each book because I'm just not that good of a chef and I'm not crafty. So I was like, okay, I need to think of something else that I can incorporate. So that's why I chose, Jane Austen, some different things that maybe are not so well known or so used so often, I guess, in cozies.
Yeah, and the most cozies, when I think of cozies, I think of cats on the cover, and I think of,
hmm
the recipes, etc. And so for me, it was a lot of fun that it
hmm
was met the rules of
hmm
cozy, but took us in a different direction. So kudos to you.
Oh,
And then you spun it in another new way with the travel theme, to me at least, with the On the Run series, which
hmm
is probably the least cozy
right. Yeah.
of your mysteries, but still had that travel feel.
Yeah. So that one was the first indie book I ever wrote, the Elusive book, the first one in that series. And that was a series that I'd always wanted to write, but it wasn't cozy. It wasn't really full on romance. It wasn't suspense. I mean, it didn't really fit anywhere. And I had floated the idea. A long time ago, I had an agent and an editor, and I floated the idea for that series to them, and they were just not interested. And I thought, okay, fine, I'm just going to do it because it's kind of a throwback to the classic kind of Mary Stuart, Elizabeth Peters romantic suspense that they don't really publish anymore. So I did it.
I love it. And that is the whole reason that I went indie as well, was to
Yeah.
write cross genre and be able to
hmm
go back and put together the kind of book I wanted. I
Yeah.
didn't want to write dysfunctional psychological thrillers. I didn't want to write pure cozy. Anyway, so
Yes.
I get
Totally
excited.
understand.
I want to write what I want to write. And I care that people read it. But you go out and you find your own readers, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so now taking that now to the book we're talking about today,
hmm
more cozy, but also historical. What got you interested in the historical bent? Is it the Anglophile in you, or was it?
Partly that, and partly because I loved reading Agatha Christie. Um, I just enjoy that time period, the 1920s, 1930s. In a way, it's much easier to do a mystery at that time because there's no cell phones, there's
Right.
less forensic stuff going on, and it is more plausible that like a little village might not have the best investigators. You know, I always feel bad when cozies are like, oh, the police officer is terrible, you know, because that's usually not very realistic. So, but I just love that time period. And I read a book, it was called, I think it was called The Affair of the 39 Cufflinks. And I thought it was a classic from the 30s. And so I was so excited when I found it. I went to see if this man had written more, and it was written in the 70s. And so I thought that the timelessness of writing something in the past was interesting, because my books that I've written even 5 or 10 years ago are dated very quickly, you know, according to the technology. So I just thought that was interesting, that it would hopefully give more of a timeless quality too.
Well, it did. And I couldn't decide if I was in, I felt like I was in the Clue game as Carmen Zombie episode, you know, when I read these books, which is combining two of the things I love the most, right? So
Me too.
it was just awesome. So the high society detective lady, now focusing in on the series, and we'll move to the book. Sara and I talked offline ahead of time that I really focus in on these books, and she was like, oh my gosh, I have to go back and read it.
It's been a while.
We write books and then it's a year later or something more that we're talking about them at their release.
Yeah.
So with respect to the high society detective lady and the premise, what's got you to write Olive herself? Olive Belgrave is our hero, our detective. So how was Olive springing to your mind? What was your inspiration?
Well, so the first thing that came to me was the location. So I took Parkview Hall, which is in the other series, and thought, what would it be like in the 1920s? And so I started there, and I thought, but I can't have my sleuth. It's always better if your sleuth has a struggle, you know, some thing to overcome. And so I decided that she would not have a lot of money. And so she's the poor relation who is related to the people who live in Parkview Hall. But so she has a not very happy home situation now. Her mother died when she was younger. Her father's remarried, and she's not really happy with her new stepmother. So she decides she's going to be one of these new working girls and go make her own way in the world.
She's Cinderella.
Yes, that's true.
We'll combine all the genres now. We're going to go Disney. Disney is a genre. So keep going. I'm sorry. So
no, Cinderella is always good. Always good to have something like that. Yes. So anyway, so she goes out and tries to get a job. And in 1923 in London, there were not a lot of jobs to be had. So she ends up making her own job, and eventually she works into becoming like the solver of problems for the high society set, because, you know, they don't really want to go to the police sometimes. They don't want to go to a private detective. So they'll call Olive and say, please come solve this little problem for us.
She's one of their set.
She's one of them. So it's okay.
and these books really do illustrate that class divide, those who are of high society and everyone else, this very, very small or narrow set, and do it brilliantly. So
thank you.
You're welcome. In your travels, I take it that you travel to different locations in England, not infrequently, to research and get a feel for the area and the characters.
Yeah, I go as often as I can, which is, I would like to go more. Actually, I have a trip planned for next summer, well, probably next spring, to go back and just visit more country homes and, you know, townhomes in London, just do the tourist thing. And what I do is I'll go and I'll just visit and take information in and then go back home. And I don't usually try and write while I'm traveling, but then once I have it, then I kind of have to mull over it for a while.
Let it percolate, simmer.
Yes.
See what comes up too. And so now, Murder in Black Tie. You know, half the interview for me to get here, but I had a plan. So
okay.
we get to Murder in Black Tie in this series, and Olive is now fairly established in her role with high society. With this particular story, give the listeners / readers / viewers a little taste of what's going on with Olive in this book.
Okay, well, she's established herself enough that she's solved a couple of cases, and she's kind of getting a reputation as somebody to go to when you have a problem. And she gets an invitation to go back to Parkview Hall, and she's like, oh, this will be a great break. I'll go back there, visit family, have a good time. In the first book, I introduced one of her cousins, Peter, and he was in the war and he has some issues. We would call them PTSD now, but then they called it shell shock, which is hard to say quickly. But so he's struggling with that. And there's an incident where it's clear, there's a loud noise, and it's clear for a couple of moments that he thinks he's back in the trenches. And it shocks everyone. And then after that, someone is murdered. And so one of the questions is, well, was he involved? Did he, because he's found near the body, and he was having one of his kind of blackout times where he's not quite sure what's going on. So of course she has to get involved and figure out what really happened. So.
And she has a bit of a sidekick, a little Sherlock and Holmes thing going with Jasper.
Yes.
And Jasper, one of the things that I enjoy about cozy is the hint of romance without the fulfillment of the relationship necessarily. And so it goes with with Jasper and Olive. Frustratingly, they have the main part for $4, but there seems to be a little thing between them that the two of them won't acknowledge.
Yes, they're getting a little bit closer, It's a fine balance, because really the books, they take a long time to write and come out, but really in book time, it's only been a couple of months. So, that's my thing, is that they would kind of gradually grow into it. And then it's interesting that is one thing that the readers are very, very interested in. I had no idea, I spend all this time on the plot and the suspects and the clues and the red herrings. And most of the email I get is about Olive and Jasper. And when are they going to get together?
Well, I got that actually from reading some of the reviews, because I noticed that is what people are really asking. But you do a super good job with the red herrings, the clues, multiple suspects. You're welcome. And this is maybe one of the knocks on the genre, is that the mysteries are too simple. You will not find this with Sarah's books. I literally the whole time kept thinking that there were viable suspects in multiple directions, and it could have gone any way up until the point at which it couldn't anymore. So it's a masterfully done mystery, but in a historical setting with a cozy feel. So.
Well, that's great to hear, because I'm glad someone appreciates all that time I put in there.
I did. I really did. And to get it historically right in terms of the pacing of the romance as well, people are just going to have to wait. It just didn't happen that way back then.
Yeah. And, let's the old moonlighting conundrum. Do you get them together and then then no one's interested anymore?
Exactly.
So, but I do love romance in my mystery, just a little bit. So I would say I'm not going to make readers mad, I hope.
Do we have more Olive books coming? Is this a series you want to keep with?
Yes, I love it. And normally when I start writing, I only have maybe an idea or two, maybe three. It's like, I can kind of see, but it's kind of foggy down the road. I'm not really sure. But this one, I think because I set it up more as she is a detective and she's getting cases, even though she's not a pure police detective, I started thinking about, she could do this and she could do this. And in the 20s, there's so much going on. So I have ideas for plenty of books. So I'm excited.
Yeah. And now I hate to ask you about favorites, because we aren't supposed to talk about them. Out of your series, do you have one you enjoy writing most?
Well, it's interesting because I was working on a crossover book. That's what I've been doing. I'm taking Olive and the On the Run series and crossing over. And so Zoe is going to be investigating something that happened in 1923. So then we get Olive's perspective on what's going on. And it was so interesting writing those at the same time. I actually ended up having to write one storyline all by itself and then go back and do the other one. But I found it much easier to write the 1920s book. Really? The portion of it. Yeah. And so I feel like I just have an affinity for that right now. I know that, in a couple of years, I may be like, I'm sick of that. But right now I really enjoy writing it. And I feel like it blends well with what I'm interested in.
It seems to, at least from our brief conversation, and the way that you have it going with multiple series, you can't get too bored. In fact, you can probably really keep up with the need to, I got to do one in this series, I got to do one in this series. But it's very interesting to me. I'm working on my first historical right now, and it's not even truly historical in the sense that it's I was born during the time in which it occurred, but I'm 52, so that does get us back to fairly historical. And it is it is so much fun to write something that
Mhm.
isn't set right where you are, and you have to go back and look at all the elements. So you
Mhm.
do a ton of research.
Mhm.
That is very apparent. It feels authentic.
Oh, thank you. Well, I do, and I enjoy the research. I end up doing a lot of reading. I wouldn't say I'm a big nonfiction reader, but when I'm thinking about a book, I'll start pulling in different nonfiction sources and reading up. And when I started the series, I read like every 1920s mystery I could find that was actually written in the 20s and early 30s,
Uh-huh.
because I wanted to kind of absorb that, the language and like how they did things, So that was really interesting just to see how books were structured and written then. And then I just try and find, like, whatever I'm working on, I'll just try and find something nonfiction about that topic. So like the third book was the Egyptian Antiquities book. And so I read a book that was written by when King Tut's tomb was discovered, the London peer, the Earl that sponsored him, they owned Highclere Castle, which was used for Downton Abbey. But there's this whole book about everything that happened during that time. So like I found that book, read that, delved into it, pulled out everything I could find.
And that to me, that's the fun part too. And I think that when you look at the way your characters talk to each other, Olive's navigation of her world, where she is a working girl in a
Mm-hmm.
world where that's not common,
Right.
it feels real. The research pays off in the reader experience. So you guys don't even know half of what goes in that you read, but it's easier in some ways, like you're saying, the small town aspect, the lack of technology, the
Mm-hmm.
things that make it easier to write a mystery. But in others, it's quite difficult because you have to put in a lot of legwork to get it right.
Yeah, you do. And your readers will certainly tell you if you mess something up. I know
They're
that.
helpful that way.
Yes.
So, with respect to your books and
Mm-hmm.
with mysteries in general, do you write with a theme in mind? Are you a thematic author? Do you ever think about theme when you're at any stage in the creation process?
I try to, but for me, I found that normally I don't know what the theme is going to be until I get about halfway into the book, maybe near the end. There's some things that for me, when I start out, it's always like, appearances are deceiving. Maybe that's a good theme, right? Because I suppose I can't get my head around it. So, like one of the books in the Murder on Location series, the novella was the Christmas novella. And I was like, I don't know. And then I got to the end of it and I went, oh, it's about gifts and giving, and which makes sense. Yeah, it took me a while.
When you're sitting at the beginning and you're thinking about theme, are you plotting? Are you outlining? Are you writing beats? Or do you just take off at a full gallop?
No, I can't have just like a blank screen. That terrifies me. I have to have like a plan, and it's not super detailed, but I do know kind of what's going to happen in each part of the book. And I kind of know the big turning points. And then normally I know like the first half pretty well. And I'll write that. And then sometimes I'll get done with that and I'll go, okay, now I need to think through this next part and get it down. So it's kind of like I do it in stages.
I think that you and I were born. What's your sign? I'm Aquarius. That's so
That's
resonant.
November.
Who knows? The idea of writing a mystery without doing some pre-planning, to me, is terrifying, because I've done it before. And if you're writing a story with that much need for the plot to be tight and you go astray, your
Mhm.
recycle time and fixing that booger
Mhm.
is so much. It's heartbreaking.
It can be, yes.
Oh, no,
I
no.
always feel like in the first like half of the book, everything's really tightly woven and all really good. And then it kind of is like a thread that like it gets looser and looser and looser to the end, like in the first draft. And then I
Uh-huh.
have to go back and really tighten up those last couple of chapters and last sections because man, it usually needs some work.
Oh yeah. Or, you're writing along and something completely different happens because it is
Mm-hmm.
so loose and it's, going all over the place. And the ricochet changes throughout the book
Mm-hmm.
are just, your head's like going with all these details. But when you get to the end and you've tightened that string, it's pretty marvelous, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's a great feeling.
Great feeling. It's probably the feeling, it's one of the only feelings about writing I like.
That's true. We spend our whole time thinking about what we want to write, and then we're struggling to write it. And then we get done and we're like, oh, that was great. And then we're thinking about the next book.
It's like that.
It is.
And talking to other writers, I always tell them, celebrate that moment, really hang on to it. But do we? No. We start stressing about the next one.
No, we have that shiny object syndrome where we're already thinking about the next book even, And then do you have lots of ideas of different things that you want to write, but you just really don't have time?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I keep a next 5 years list on Google Drive, and it just keeps growing. Don't knock any off. I mean, I do. I write several books a year, but I never get there.
But then you add maybe 5 to 7 more, right?
It's terrible. It's terrible. Well, you guys, this has been a lot of fun, but I've got to go now to the solemnly sworn duty part of the podcast, which is, this has been a solely owned and copyrighted production of Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. And thanks to Pam Stack for being awesome, and our producer, because that is legally required. And the other thing I would tell you is that if you haven't had a chance to go pick up a Murder in Black Tie yet, let's get a recommendation directly from Sara here. Are you a purist? Do you suggest they start with, is it Murder at Archley Manor, the first one? Or do your books read as standalone? How would you recommend people proceed?
Well, they each stand alone. So if you just want to dive right into Murder in Black Tie, you can. But if you want the whole thing about, like how Olive came to be in this situation and kind of more the personal interactions between the people and the characters, then you probably want to start with the first one. I always start with the first one.
Always start with the first. So you guys can do it either way, but now you've heard it. And while you're out there grabbing one or more of the High Society Detective Lady books, next week on the show we have Sandaria Faye. She's a Dallas-based author and the architect of Lit Night in Dallas, which is a phenom right now where authors get up and read, and it's grouped by genre. Super cool. If you're in the Dallas area and get a chance to go, please do. But her debut novel, The Mourner's Bench, and that's what we'll talk about next week. And get out to my website, and I want you to do 2 things. The first is I want you to go subscribe to the podcast. I mean, why not? Get the RSS feed free, automatically delivered, and then click on the link and go take a look at how you can support writers like Sara as they are bringing to you the enjoyment that makes your life better. So get out there and take a look at how you can pledge. And last but not least, I said 2 things and now I'm going with 3, and that's my prerogative because it's my show. But the third is I've got a new novel coming out next month, and it's a spin-off series from my What Doesn't Kill You mystery series. And it's the one that's set in 1976. So it's historical, and it's a little bit different from me, but has some spin-off characters from the What Doesn't Kill You series. And I've really enjoyed putting it together. So that means you guys got to get busy and go out there and refresh yourself by rereading or reading the books in the series so that you're ready for this new direction, November 15th. Okay. And Sara, thank you so much. It's been a long time coming, but I have so enjoyed getting to meet you and chat with you here.
Oh, it's been so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have a great week. Read a great book. Why don't you?